He was a man hollowed by grief, his wife gone forever, his land turning to dust, and only his little girl left to remind him what love once felt like. Then one night, fate knocked on that lonely door. He touched it and walked toward hope, though the whole world had already given up on him. The townsfolk mocked him, called him a fool chasing ghosts. But when his daughter saw her father humiliated, she wept and whispered, "Pa, do it for Mama." What happened after that night became a legend, a story of pain, faith, and a love that outlived the grave. Don't miss this story till the very end. Tonight, your heart will find its answer. Tell us where you're watching from and join our Sleep West family as we ride into the tale of a father who refused to let go. Tell us, where are you watching from? Join our Sleep West family and let's ride into the story. The morning sun, a brutal, honest orb, climbed slow over the New Mexico plains. Its light spilled across the Thompson Ranch, highlighting the cracks in the adobe walls and the skeletal frame of a windmill that hadn't turned reliably in 5 years. Daniel Thompson, 45 years old, a man whose hands were permanently shaped by rope and leather, tightened the worn cinch on his aging mare, Bess. He was a rancher now, a title that felt more like a memory of prosperity than a current fact. Behind the cracked window pane of the small, weather-worn cabin, he could just make out the silhouette of his little girl, May. He heard the soft, fragile sound of her cough, a dry, persistent rasp that had been an unwelcome guest in their home since the spring rains failed. May was 9, but the illness made her look small and delicate, a wildflower fighting for life in the drought. Every sunrise brought the same silent prayer, breathed out into the dusty air, that her breath would grow stronger, that the radiant, infectious laugh he remembered would finally come back to her. He paused with his boot in the stirrup, looking back at the window one last time. "Hold on, darlin'," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "I'll bring the doctor soon as work pays up, I promise." He pulled his wide-brimmed hat low, its leather softened and darkened by decades of sweat and sun, and he nudged Bess into a weary trot. He was riding toward the town of Copper Creek, the only settlement within a day's ride, and the wind whispered through the dry mesquite like a hollow, melancholy echo of his late wife Clara's singing. It was a sound that both comforted him and intensified the aching emptiness in his life. Copper Creek was barely a cluster of buildings, a single, sprawling saloon called the Thirsty Mule, a busy blacksmith shop constantly ringing with the strike of hammer on steel, and a small town hall built of raw pine that still gave off the faint, clean smell of sap. Daniel arrived, the dust on his boots thickening the air around him. The ranch work he was doing for old Mr. Sterling was enough to buy beans and coffee, but nowhere near enough for a specialist. As he tied Bess to the rail outside the general store, a white flyer caught his eye, fluttering desperately against a rough wooden post. He read the hand-scrawled letters. "Harvest, supper, and talent evenin', Saturday night. Proceeds to charity." His eyes scanned the fine print below, and his calloused hand instinctively moved toward the paper. The grand prize for the raffle, the flyer promised, was a fully funded visit from a doctor in Santa Fe, complete with travel expenses. A sliver of hope, thin but sharp, pierced the gloom that usually surrounded him. Maybe, just maybe, luck was finally ready to turn and look his way. Sheriff Harlan, a kind man with a grizzled beard and slow, deliberate movements, emerged from the store, carrying a sack of feed. He nodded a greeting. "You gonna come by, Daniel?" "Folks could use a good smile, especially you." Daniel sighed, running a hand over the stubble on his chin. "Don't reckon I got much talent left, Sheriff. Been a long time since I did anything but mend fence and chase cows." Harlan gave a warm, knowing grin. "Bring that girl of yours, then. The music and the sight of people enjoying themselves might do her good, just for a night." The sheriff's words hit a nerve. Daniel hadn't touched a piano, not since Clara passed. The dusty, out-of-tune upright back at the ranch, a wedding gift from her family, stood silent, a monument to a joy that was gone. Yet, he still kept the melody she used to hum close to his heart, the soft, simple tune she'd sing while hanging laundry beneath the cottonwoods, a sound that felt like the definition of home. Saturday night arrived, cool and clear. Lanterns flickered inside the town hall, casting warm, shifting shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of pine, fried chicken, and 100 unwashed cowhands. Rough hands that spent their days roping steers and branding cattle now clapped with unexpected enthusiasm in rhythm to the lively tunes pouring from a pair of overworked fiddles. Daniel carried May inside, holding her small, light body close. She was wrapped in an old woolen shawl that was much too big for her narrow shoulders. He settled her on a bench near the back, where she could watch without being overwhelmed by the noise. Near the small, makeshift stage, a battered, weather-beaten upright piano stood proudly. Its once white keys were yellowed and chipped, and one leg was conspicuously braced by a wobbly milk crate, a silent testament to years of neglect and rough handling. From a table overflowing with bottles, a loud, drunken voice cut through the noise. It belonged to Tanner Boyd, a notoriously mean-spirited hand from a rival ranch. "Hey, Daniel! Why don't you get up there and give us a tune?" Tanner slurred, a cruel edge to his voice. "Bet you can't play worth a damn no more, if you ever could." Laughter, nervous and sharp, rippled through the hall. Daniel managed a thin, tight smile, ready to offer a polite refusal and sink back into the anonymity of the shadows. He had no desire to be a spectacle. But then, May's small hand gently tugged the sleeve of his patched shirt. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din. "Mama used to say music can make the hurt smaller." He looked down into her tired, earnest eyes. He saw not a judgment of his ability, but a desperate plea for a moment of their past. A tiny connection to the mother she barely remembered. Her cheeks were pale, but her eyes held a spark he hadn't seen in months. He gave a slow, firm nod. He took off his hat, placed it on the bench beside her, and with a deep, cleansing breath, he started toward the stage. The hall hushed immediately, the silence spreading from the front rows backward as Daniel Thompson, the quiet ranch hand, stepped into the light. The only sounds were the creak of the old pine floorboards under his boots and the distant howl of a coyote. His clothes were dusty, his flannel shirt threadbare and patched. But his hands, those same hands that could break a wild colt or mend a stretch of fence with equal precision, rested gently on the stained ivory keys. He settled onto the rickety stool. He pressed down. The very first key groaned out a flat, sour, painfully out-of-tune note. A nervous chuckle rose from the back of the hall, but it died quickly, strangled by the sheer, profound quiet that followed. The second note followed the first, slow, trembling, and entirely filled with the heavy weight of memory. Daniel closed his eyes. He played the song Clara had composed the night before May was born. A simple melody she had named Home Under the Cottonwoods. It was a waltz, simple and honest, a three-quarter-time rhythm that spoke not of grand ballrooms, but of quiet evenings on a porch swing. The melody rolled through the packed hall, not like a performance, but like a deeply felt prayer carried on a sudden, powerful gust of wind. It wasn't technically perfect. He missed notes, and the broken piano fought him. But the feeling behind it was pure. The men, who minutes before had been loudly joking, removed their hats and held them respectfully against their chests. The women pressed their hands to their hearts, their eyes suddenly glossy with unshed tears. Even the old wall-mounted clock in the hall seemed to stop ticking, suspended in time by the power of the sound. In that moment, Daniel wasn't merely a poor, weary ranch hand hoping for a raffle ticket. He was a man remembering the sweet sound of his wife's laughter, the smell of rain on the dry, cracked earth after a long summer, and the sacred promise he had once made to raise their child kind and strong. He wasn't playing for them. He was playing her memory for his daughter, and they were simply lucky enough to listen. When the final, lingering note faded away, there was no immediate applause. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint whistle of the wind sneaking through the open door, carrying the ghostly echo of the tune out into the dark desert night. It was Tanner Boyd, the drunk heckler, who finally broke the silence. His voice was subdued, quiet, almost a whisper. Didn't know a broken piano could cry like that. Sheriff Harlan cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously bright as he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Folks," he announced, his voice thick with emotion, "I think we just found our raffle winner. That kind of medicine is worth more than any trip to Santa Fe." The applause, when it came, was not polite or hesitant. It was a roar, a sudden cathartic thunder after a long, oppressive drought. Daniel opened his eyes and looked straight at May. Her cheeks were flushed pink, and her eyes, bright and clear, were fixed on him. It was the first time in months he had seen her truly, utterly alive. The next dawn was crisper, the sunlight less oppressive. The whole town, it seemed, had gathered outside the hall. They were there to see Daniel and May off, sending them toward Santa Fe with the official signed letter guaranteeing the doctor's visit, and enough hard-earned coin collected in a dusty hat to pay for the long, necessary journey. Mrs. Cole, the kindly baker who smelled perpetually of cinnamon and yeast, pressed a sack of warm rolls into Daniel's hand. "You gave us something last night, Daniel," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Don't you forget to play again now." Daniel looked at the humble townspeople, their faces earnest and kind. He tipped his hat low. "I reckon I won't, ma'am," he replied, a genuine smile finally creasing the corners of his eyes. For her, always. May was settled comfortably on the wagon seat, tucked securely beneath a clean blanket. She waved a small, cheerful hand, her shawl fluttering behind them like a small, triumphant white flag of hope. Behind them, the old town hall stood quiet, but the air around the broken piano seemed to hum faintly with the lingering, gentle ghosts of his waltz. Miles passed beneath the wagon wheels. The desert stretched wide and vast, but for the first time, it felt forgiving, not threatening. May slept soundly against her father's arm, her breathing even and deep. Daniel hummed the melody under his breath, watching the mountains turn purple and blue in the distance. For the first time in the years since Clara's death, the song didn't ache, it healed. He realized then that music wasn't just a fragile vessel for remembering the dead, a sad echo of what was lost. It was a profound, life-affirming act, a vibrant, necessary tool for keeping the living alive. They never returned to Copper Creek. The ranch was sold, the old cabin left to the dust. Yet, the story lingered. Every Christmas, a letter would arrive for Sheriff Harlan, each containing a small pressed desert flower and a single line of music written in a neat, careful hand that was not Daniel's, but his daughter's. May grew strong. She recovered completely, and she learned to play the piano herself, guided by the memory of her mother's songs and her father's powerful performance. Somewhere, in a small adobe church near the slow, winding Rio Grande, she would play that same waltz at sunset, a gentle ritual for herself and her father. It was the melody her father once coaxed from a broken piano, the one that forced a hard, forgotten town to remember that it still possessed a deep and noble heart. If you ever find yourself passing through a quiet, forgotten western town, remember this story. Because every tale we share keeps the spirit of the frontier alive, and every one of you who joins us keeps that fire burning brighter. So, join our Sleep West family. Each one of you sparks our curiosity to bring more stories like these from the heart of the Wild West. Together, we'll keep these legends riding through the night. You're watching Sleep West, and we'll see you down the road.